Now, it is my duty to introduce to yourselves Honorable Minister Buti Manamela, who is the Deputy Minister responsible for youth. He arises from the Youth League and appropriately, therefore, a minister responsible for youth and dealing with the challenges that face the youth of South Africa. Deputy Minister, before you start and as you approach the podium, I'll have to hand to you these documents which will be the kind of food for thought as you go and deal with your challenges. Let me hand over these two reports. Okay. The two reports, Deputy Minister, are morbidity and mortality patterns among the youth of South Africa, reflecting on 2013, and then, of course, and the labor market, focusing on the youth from 2008 to 2015. I know the challenges are major, Deputy Minister, I don't envy you, but this is your food for thought. Ladies and gentlemen, give a round of applause to welcome Deputy Minister Manamela. I'll keep it there.
Thank you very much, Statistician General Mr. Pali Lihotla, Program Director Professor Harting, and also Professor Geyer, ladies and gentlemen, invited guests. I'm very honored to have been invited to officiate as part of the 2015 annual ISIbalo Symposium gathering that we are here as part of. And as we know, and I think Professor Harting spoke at length about how Stellenbosch University claims its stake amongst the historic institutions in our country, not only for having provided academic excellence, but also having contributed into the political being of our country and of our society. This is an institution that has given rise to our erstwhile political leaders. And if this academic institution could provide outstanding education for the minority few in the past, it is well poised to provide the best education for the majority of people in a democratic society. And we're quite pleased with some of the transformation measures that have been happening recently, and also with the set objectives that both the faculty and the university as a whole has set for itself. The ISIbalo Symposium seeks to promote intellectual capacity in South Africa and also beyond our borders. I have had the opportunity to address the African young statisticians last year as they made their strides in the quest for statistical excellence under the auspicious ISIbalo Capacity Development Program driven by the National Statistics Office, Stats SA. And it is by no accident that Stats SA has teamed up with academic institutions in our beloved country to continue to search for what was lost in mathematics and statistics education in our country. I'm also duly informed that the Stats SA and the University of Stellenbosch have since 2009 worked together through the Center for Regional and Urban Innovation and Statistical Exploration, which is CRUISE. So instead of going on retirement, Professor Geyer, we are now on cruise mode. which is housed in the Department of Geography and Environmental Studies at Stellenbosch University to enhance spatial and statistical knowledge. We are pleased today to mention that CRUIS, as it has been repeated here, has been providing research and training in urban and regional systems to capacitate public sector, non-governmental organizations, and international development agencies on the African continent, and has produced more than 50 master's graduates in the past 4 years. And we're also more pleased that you will be introducing more programs in the coming few years. Academic institutions all over the world are known for their independent intellectual capacity. A premise for which they are established is that they do not have to be directed where to search for intellect, and they have the carte blanche to decide. Let me venture to set a challenge for CRUIS, of course with caution that my academic limitations may not measure up to all the professors gathered here today and the master's graduates, 17 you were saying, if it's pass one, pass all. On the 12th of February 2015, on the occasion of the State of the Nation, President Zuma addressed the country and said, and I quote, "Over 6 billion will be spent in 13 cities on planning, building and operating integrated public transport networks during this financial year. We'll also continue to improve the infrastructure in schools and higher education institutions to create a conducive environment for learning and teaching," close quote. This policy statement has its beginnings and its endings with the work that Stats SA and the University of Stellenbosch had in mind when they set up CRUIS. And I hope that one of these days, I will read a few academic papers that respond to many more policy statements like this, and that there is no successful policy formulation without academic excellence. And I've scanned through some of the papers that will be presented later today, and I think that they're going a long way into contributing towards the transformation of our country. Decisions, important decisions about where a school is built, where a university is built, where a factory is set up, and how people get to and from work, what sort of businesses people can set up where, are important decisions that helps to take forward our country, because those were in the first place, decisions which were taken and implemented to divide our country. So therefore your work is quite critical in taking forward transformation of our country. Program Director, we are also reminded that on the 17th of September 1953, the then Prime Minister of Native Affairs, who would later become South Africa's Prime Minister, Dr. Verwoerd, addressed the minority in Parliament and said, "What is the use of teaching the Bantu child mathematics when it cannot use it in practice?" This statement should not be taken in a light context. It was a political statement delivered by a supreme apartheid leader who would later usher one of the most devastating edifices of such socio-economic and intellectual casualties that will take years and even decades to reverse. And Dr. Verwoerd is obviously no stranger to Stellenbosch University, having been academically groomed here and even practiced here as an academic. And it is for this very reason that Stellenbosch University has even a greater role in our democratic society to reverse the legacy of the past. The founders of Stellenbosch University understood that power and knowledge cannot be separated. They understood very well that the production of knowledge tends to be a critical function in the deployment of power. And that Michael Foucault tells us that knowledge sets into motion a particular set of power relations, such as the interaction among people, institutions, and even nations, and that knowledge is therefore never neutral, objective, or disinterested. Implicitly, knowledge therefore becomes powerful. Democracy teaches us that to tread with caution the deployment of knowledge and power. I raise this matter of knowledge and power because expertise sometimes serves only the affluent and powerful. And expertise is imbued with values and therefore cannot be objective, neutral, or disinterested. Disinterestedness is not realistic at all. We have often seen how experts have attempted, sometimes successfully so, to gain public trust through their rhetoric of neutrality. And never should another race dominate another through intellectual instruments so designed to exclude others from equality. The development of knowledge in general and statistics in particular on the African continent is faced with many challenges. There are a number of developmental programs that Africa has led in the recent past, which require to be taken forward as unique African contribution to the global development agenda. This is critical in order to consolidate Africa's common position on post-2015 development agenda and Africa's 2063 agenda. This requires a deliberate process by which African leadership should occupy the space to advance the cause of African initiatives. Failure to do so will always lead to Africa being left behind and its ideals stolen and repackaged for reuse by others. There are 4 programs that are strategically linked to one another and on their basis command attention by political leaders with support from academic excellence. First, in 2010, Africa adopted a program of civil registration and vital statistics, and this paved the way for leaving no one behind, and by so doing, defined the central elements of data revolution in Africa. Second, the CRVS followed on a successful implementation of the 2010 round of censuses, which saw Africa's successful censuses in this round rise from 38 countries in 2000 round to 48 countries. The program provides hope for the developing world that indeed it is possible to eliminate the scandal of invisibility and that we should leave no one behind. Third, Africa performed exceptionally in the 2011 International Comparisons Program, where 49 countries participated, and this has formed a rich data source for regional consumption markets, which then provides critical information for Africa industrialization strategy. Fourth, the Africa peer review mechanism has made it possible to measure governance, peace, security, a matter that has fallen off the agenda of the United Nations Statistics Commission. The measurement of governance, peace, and security draws its methodological possibilities from the APRM, and this is unique contribution by African statisticians on measurements of governance, peace, and also of security. All these 4 African challenges cannot be dealt with without academic excellence, and thus the ISIbalo capacity building program and its inherent sub-programs is well placed to address some of these or all of these challenges. The Cruise Center is best placed to navigate the space between Stats SA and the University of Stellenbosch, in that Stats SA would be in a position to maintain independence from political interference. We always want the numbers to look good, so that they change the fortunes or misfortunes of the electoral outcomes. So it would always be nice if the statistician general says that employment is growing, the rate of spread of HIV/AIDS is going down, all of those. It is always nice to hear that. But we think that this relationship is important to maintain independence from that political interference. We expect more collaboration between Stats SA and other institutions of higher learning. As we reach for academic excellence, we will ensure that methods never trump numbers again in our history. That way, Stats SA can appropriately assume a role of being a pathfinder for the nation as search for and monitor and evaluate policies that will bring a better life for all. I've been duly informed that today the Statistician General, in fact, has actually handed me 2 reports on the morbidity and mortality patterns among the youth of South Africa, as well as the National and Provincial Labour Market Youth Report. Experience has taught us that South African youth, similar with other countries across the globe, are in a vulnerable situation in terms of both labor market and health outcomes. The National Development Plan reminds us that it is widely recognized that health issues and services in South Africa have been shaped by powerful historical and social forces such as vast income inequalities, poverty, unemployment, racial and gender discrimination. The National Youth Policy 2020, which has been adopted by Cabinet on the 27th of May this year, relied heavily on the work done by Statistics South Africa and various other academic institutions to define the nature of the challenges facing young people and determine the progress made over the last 21 years. The set of interventions proposed in the National Youth Policy in education, creating work, skills development, economic participation, fighting the scourge of drugs and substance abuse, and the feasibility of the implementation of this National Youth Policy also relied heavily on available statistical data. The enormity of work to be done in changing the quality of life of young people in particular and benefiting from the demographic dividend will require the concomitant actions by all social forces, especially in academia and other non-government actors. However, history has placed a heavy burden on the state to lead in the transformation discourse. And projects such as this one are crucial in building the capacity of the state to shape an inclusive developmental path. We have to ensure that we destroy the enclaves of power that were created post-apartheid, which seems to be reproducing the social relations of the past. We can only do this if we empower young people to be able to do things for themselves and equally empower public institutions to create platforms for the realization of the objectives as set in the National Development Plan and the National Youth Policy 2020. We have been through trial and error over the last 21 years, but gradually, learning from our short experience and through the institutions that we have built, we believe that we can and will make a breakthrough. The continued discontent and justifiable impatience signifies that failure is not an option. Otherwise, the threat to our democracy becomes even more real with every regression made in changing the lives of the majority. There's a lot of work ahead of us for all developing countries, South Africa included, and South Africa in particular. And knowledge, intellect, and statistics are right at the center of this work. We can only expect sections of our society to catch up speedily where other sections have benefited through centuries of colonial and apartheid increment if we work together without fail. I wish you all the best in all your deliberations with the hope that this symposium and its outcomes will add on the multiple initiatives that our country is engaged in so that we can all have our day under the Rainbow Nation. I thank you.